Why did no one look her in the eye? Even the ones who once swore they'd follow her anywhere now stared at the floor, the rain, the shadows, anywhere but her. The rotor blades above screamed through the storm, drowning the sound of their shame. Lightning flashed, white and merciless, and for a single instant Captain Maya Reeves saw herself reflected in every pair of eyes around her, not as a soldier, not even as a pilot, but as a problem to be erased. The cuffs around her wrists bit into the skin, cold steel against trembling bone. She didn't fight them, not yet. The sea below was black, endless, a void waiting to swallow the truth. The men in the cabin called it transport protocol, but they knew what it was: a burial without a grave, a ghost-making operation. No trial, no headline, just disappearance. The helicopter jolted through turbulence, shaking so violently the interior lights flickered out. For a heartbeat, they were blind, just wind, rain, and fear. Then the emergency lights blinked on again, red and sickly, washing every face in blood tones. She caught the commander's silhouette near the open hatch, his hand on the lever, his voice steady only because it had been trained to be. "You were never supposed to see this far, Captain," he said. Maya stared at him, her breath even, her mind a battlefield of calculations. "And yet here we are," she murmured. He flinched, barely, but enough for her to see the guilt he'd buried under orders. The kind of guilt that eats a man slow. The storm outside tore itself apart. Rain came sideways, slicing through the cabin, soaking her uniform. The smell of oil, metal, and betrayal mixed in the air. Her pulse slowed to a rhythm she could control. She remembered a flight instructor once telling her, "Altitude is life. Panic is death." They thought this was her fall. She knew better. Falls are only fatal when you stop thinking. She looked at the commander again, Colonel Corson, the man she'd once saluted, trusted, even defended when rumors began to crawl through the ranks. He had signed off on missions that killed more civilians than enemies, doctored reports to protect private investors, and buried anyone who asked too many questions. And she had found the files. She traced them to a satellite relay buried under the guise of humanitarian aid shipments. She decrypted names, contractors, generals, politicians, people who had traded military flight plans for cash and power. She'd been stupid enough to confront them with proof. And now here she was, cuffed and condemned, her fate disguised as a transport mission gone wrong. Corson gave a signal. 2 soldiers moved toward her. They couldn't even look at her face. One gripped her shoulder, the other held her by the elbow. She didn't resist. Her body moved like water, calm, slow, calculating. "Any last words, Captain?" Maya's lips curved faintly. "Yeah," she said softly. "When the report's filed, make sure they spell my name right." Then they shoved her. The world dropped out from under her. Air exploded in her lungs. The wind roared past her ears like an ocean of knives. The helicopter's red light pulsed above her like a fatting heartbeat, smaller, dimmer, until it was gone. She was falling, handcuffed, betrayed, and utterly alone. But in that split second between terror and silence, something inside her clicked. Not fear, not surrender. Clarity. She tucked her knees in, angled her shoulders, felt the resistance of the air change the drag. Every motion was instinct. The ghost of 1,000 training jumps rewritten by survival. Her cuffs cut deep into her skin, but she twisted her wrists just enough to redirect the fall, to gain control over chaos. The rain burned against her face. The ocean surged upward like a beast ready to devour her. She closed her eyes a moment before impact, whispered to no one but herself, "Not like this." The water hit like concrete. The pain was instant, total, blooming through her chest in white fire. For seconds there was no direction, just cold, dark, and pressure. Her lungs screamed. Her body convulsed. But when the instinct to breathe turned to instinct to fight, she surfaced, coughing, gasping, dragging air into her lungs that tasted of salt and storm. Above her the helicopter's sound was gone. They had left her, written her off as another classified ghost. Good, let them. She turned onto her back, waves crashing over her, and stared at the sky split by lightning. Each flash burned an image into her mind, faces of those who trusted her, died under her command, believed in something pure before corruption poisoned it. The betrayal wasn't just hers. It belonged to all of them. A wave slammed her under again. She kicked upward, lungs screaming. Pain sharpened her focus. She spotted a faint glimmer in the distance, a fishing vessel maybe, its lights flickering like stars half drowned by the storm. She fought the current, every stroke a battle between body and will. Her cuffed wrists made swimming a nightmare, but she refused to die here, not in their silence. She reached a floating cargo crate, clinging to it like a lifeline. Her numb fingers found a jagged edge. She hooked the chain of her cuffs and let the motion of the waves pull. Once, twice, a third time. The metal link snapped, slicing her wrist open. Blood and seawater mixed, but her hands were free. She laughed once, hoarse, breathless at the absurdity of it. Freedom born from pain. That felt fitting. Hours passed. The storm thinned to mist. When the dawn finally broke, the horizon glowed in shades of gray and gold. She saw a coastline ahead, cliffs jagged like teeth, black rock glistening with morning rain. She swam until her arms felt carved from stone, until her knees scraped sand and her face met rock. She crawled onto the shore, collapsing on a narrow ledge above the tide. Her body shook with exhaustion. The salt burned her wounds. The sound of the waves was deafening, relentless, but she was alive. Alive was enough for now. Her mind drifted. She saw her father's face again, that old airman's grin. Never surrender altitude or hope, he used to say. She had both lost, and yet here she was clinging to one and building the other from nothing. When she opened her eyes again, the sun was rising. The storm was gone. The world looked clean, cruelly so. The helicopter's echo had faded, but the memory hadn't. Somewhere out there, Corson and his men were already writing her eulogy. Mission failure, body unrecovered. She smiled through cracked lips. "You're right," she whispered. "My body wasn't recovered." She rolled onto her knees, blood dripping from her hands. It resurrected. She staggered inland, through mud and salt, until she found an old fishing shack half collapsed, eaten by rust and years. The door groaned as she pushed it open. Inside was nothing but the smell of wet wood, old nets, and a single flickering lantern. She scavenged what she could: a coil of wire, a rusted knife, a flare gun with no flares, and a battered first aid kit. The stitches she made were crude, trembling, but they held. Every pull of the needle was a name whispered: soldiers lost, civilians erased, pilots grounded by politics and greed. Each name was a flame. By evening, her uniform hung by the fire she'd built from splintered wood. Her hands shook, but her eyes were steady. She picked up the knife, tested its balance, and looked toward the horizon. A voice on a nearby frequency crackled through the shack's broken radio. A supply vessel, reporting engine trouble somewhere north of her position. Perfect. She dragged the crate outside, pried off its metal lining, and built a crude mirror. Using the flare gun's cracked lens, she turned it into a signal reflector, flashing Morse code across the bay. An hour passed, then two, then movement, lights on the water, a lifeboat lowering. She crouched behind the rocks, hidden, waiting. Two deckhands approached the shore, their voices swallowed by the waves. They weren't soldiers, just men trying to fix an engine in the wrong storm. She stepped from the shadows, soaked, silent, eyes like a blade. They froze. She said only one thing, calm, low, impossible to refuse: "Help me reach the mainland." They didn't argue. Some people command obedience not with rank, but with the weight of what they've survived. As the boat carried her through the dark, Maya stared at the reflection of lightning on the water. Every flash painted her face anew: soldier, survivor, ghost, avenger. She didn't yet know what she'd do when she reached land, only that the men who had betrayed her still believed she was gone. And that was her greatest weapon. She watched the helicopter's last light fade from the sky and whispered into the wind, They think they buried me, but they only planted a storm. How long could a person pretend to be dead before the world started believing it? Maya Reeves had asked herself that 100 times between the silence of the waves and the hum of the vessel's engine. The men who had pulled her from the sea hadn't asked questions. Maybe it was fear, maybe it was respect, or maybe they'd seen enough storms in their lives to recognize one when it took human form. Wrapped in a tarp near the bow, she watched the coastline dissolve into fog. Every heartbeat felt borrowed. Every breath was a negotiation between exhaustion and fury. The sea rolled under them like a beast sleeping uneasily, and the rhythm of it pulled her mind backward, to the last briefing she'd attended before everything went wrong. Corson's voice had been calm then, too calm. The kind of tone a man uses when he's already chosen who won't make it back. She stood at the edge of that table, questioning the flight plans, the rerouted cargo manifests, the unexplained delay in satellite clearance. He dismissed her concerns with a smile. "You're overthinking it, Captain. Stick to flying." She'd stuck to flying, right into a betrayal. A shudder ran through the deck as the boat climbed a wave. One of the crew, a tall man with weather-beaten skin and eyes that had seen too many bad nights, brought her a dented cup of coffee. He didn't speak English well, but he didn't need to. Compassion doesn't need translation. She nodded once, a silent thank you. Hours bled into each other, the rain softened. The air grew warmer. She kept her eyes on the horizon, calculating wind direction, estimating distance from shore. She didn't just need land, she needed a plan. Proof. Allies. A way to turn ghosts into justice. When the vessel docked at dawn, the harbor was quiet. Lisbon, maybe. She couldn't be sure. The smell of salt mixed with oil and cigarettes. Dockworkers shouted in Portuguese. Seagulls wheeled overhead, laughing like they knew some cruel secret. The crew busied themselves unloading crates, and in the confusion, Maya slipped away, coat pulled tight around her, boots silent on the wet concrete. No one noticed her vanish. The best part about being dead is that people stop looking for you. She walked for hours through narrow alleys and under bridges streaked with rust and graffiti. The city felt foreign but alive, its heartbeat steady, its chaos familiar. She stopped only when she found a payphone that still worked, its receiver cracked but functional. She slid in a stolen ID card she'd taken from one of the sailors and punched a number she hadn't dialed in years. The ringtone was long, then a click. "Maya." The voice was a whisper of disbelief, half prayer, half fear. "Annika," she breathed, leaning against the cold glass. "I need you to act like I'm still dead." Silence, then the faint exhale of someone recalculating their world. "I heard about the crash," Annika said. "The reports. They're lies, and I'm still in the middle of them." Another pause, then Annika's tone hardened, the soldier waking up inside her again. "What do you need?" "A way in, off-grid, and I need it fast." Within hours, Annika had sent coordinates to a private hangar outside Lisbon, an old surveillance strip decommissioned after the last conflict. It was the kind of place where the military stored things they didn't want the world to remember. Perfect. Maya moved through the city like smoke. Every street was a test of her ability to stay invisible. At the hangar gate, an old mechanic waved her through without question. Annika's message must have reached him first. Inside, the smell of jet fuel and metal filled the air. The past came rushing back. Annika stood near a drone, her uniform replaced by civilian clothes but her posture still pure discipline. Her hair was shorter now, her eyes older. "You look like hell," she said. "I've been there," Maya replied. They didn't hug. Soldiers rarely do, but the silence between them carried the weight of survival and loyalty. Annika led her to a table cluttered with files, cables, and a terminal glowing in the dark. "I kept tracking the accounts after you disappeared," she said quietly. "Didn't tell anyone. Thought maybe, I don't know, maybe the truth would need company when it came back." Maya smiled faintly, a ghost of warmth in a world too cold for it. You always did have better instincts than most generals. She dropped a small waterproof drive onto the table, salvaged from the encrypted locker she'd hidden years ago under her old call sign. Annika plugged it in. The screen came alive with code, numbers, names. Corson, Vale, Hughes, contractors, defense budgets, bank transfers disguised as humanitarian aid, billions siphoned under the flag of protection. Jesus, Annika whispered, it goes higher than we thought. Maya nodded, it always does. They worked in silence, fingers flying across keys, decrypting layers of evidence until the screen filled with faces, men shaking hands over fake treaties, smiling for cameras while signing death warrants behind closed doors. You know what happens if we publish this, Annika said finally. They'll come for us both. They already did, Maya said softly. They just missed. She traced the outline of Corson's face on the monitor with a trembling hand. They think control is power, she said. They've forgotten that truth is heavier. By morning, they had a plan. A summit was scheduled in Geneva, a gathering of defense leaders, diplomats, and private contractors. The perfect stage for exposure. If they could broadcast the data live from inside, every network in the world would pick it up before anyone could silence it. You sure you want to walk into that? Annika asked. Maya's eyes met hers. They already threw me out of the sky, Annika. Everything after that is ascent. Annika almost smiled. Almost. You're insane. I'm alive, there's a difference. They spent the next 48 hours building new identities. Maya became Ellen Cade, liaison for a fictitious defense consultancy. Her forged documents were flawless, courtesy of a few dark corners of the intelligence web Annika still had access to. They modified the drone to act as both surveillance and transmitter. It would hover high above Geneva, invisible, recording everything. The third night, Maya stood on the runway beside the aircraft, dawn bleeding into the clouds. Wind tugged at her coat. Her reflection in the drone's polished hull looked almost like someone else, hair cropped short, eyes colder, steadier. You sure you're ready? Annika asked, voice low. Maya adjusted the strap of her duffel. Ready ended when they threw me out of that sky. As she climbed aboard the small transport jet, Annika handed her a small communicator, earpiece, frequency-coded. You're not alone out there, she said. Maya paused, meeting her eyes. No, but I'll have to look like I am. The door closed, the engines roared, and the ground began to fall away. As the plane cut through the upper atmosphere, Maya looked out the window at the endless blue stretching below. She wondered how many lives had been traded in boardrooms pretending to protect peace. She wondered how many soldiers were still out there fighting wars whose purposes had been sold for profit. Below her, the clouds looked soft, but she knew better than most softness could hide a fall. She opened her notebook, the one she'd kept hidden inside her boot since the day she escaped the sea. Inside were names, coordinates, codes, but on the last page, written in smudged ink, were just 3 words, for those erased. That was her mission now, not revenge, revelation. The pilot's voice crackled through the cabin. Descent in 20 minutes, weather's clear over Geneva. Clear skies, the irony wasn't lost on her. As the plane descended, the city appeared below, shimmering lights, polished glass, power disguised as diplomacy. She checked her badge one last time. Ellen Cade. Defense liaison, no mistakes, no tremors in the voice, just calm, detached. Dead women don't hesitate. When the wheels touched down, she exhaled once, steady. The kind of breath you take before walking into fire. At customs, her forged credentials passed without a blink. She walked through the terminal surrounded by executives, aides, and soldiers in suits, all part of the same machine, the same lie. Outside, the air was cold. The lake glistened under morning light. Geneva looked peaceful, indifferent, like it didn't know it was about to witness its own unmasking. She checked her watch, synced with Annika's drone orbiting high above. The operation had begun. Every camera, every frequency, every signal was a thread waiting to be pulled. Maya adjusted her earpiece. Annika's voice crackled in her ear. "You're live, Ghost." Maya smiled faintly. "Then let's haunt them." She stepped into a waiting car, the driver holding a placard with her alias. The ride to the Summit Hotel was silent. The streets rolled past in reflections of glass and gold. She studied her own face in the window, still, unreadable. The face of someone reborn in the wreckage of her own death. When the car stopped, she stepped out into the sound of distant sirens and camera shutters. The building loomed above her, all steel and mirrors. For a second she thought she saw herself reflected infinitely, 1,000 versions of Maya Reeves starring back, each carrying the same silent vow. She straightened her collar, touched the hidden mic beneath her lapel, and walked inside. They had taken her sky once. Now she was going to make them choke on it. Why did the air feel thinner inside the building than it had above the clouds? Maybe it wasn't altitude, maybe it was guilt. Every step Maya took across the marble floor of the Summit Hotel echoed like the ticking of a countdown she had started the moment she walked in. Men in tailored suits brushed past her, their badges gleaming, their laughter too rehearsed to be real. The lobby smelled of polished ambition, cologne, paper, and secrets buried under protocol. She kept her gaze steady, her movements measured. The forged badge on her jacket read Ellen Cade, Defense Liaison, a lie printed in black ink, believable only because she wore it with the calm of someone who had nothing left to lose. The elevator doors slid open. Mirrors on every side multiplied her reflection into infinity. She saw the woman she used to be, uniformed, proud, loyal, overlapping with the one she had become, stripped down to purpose, to truth, to survival. Her earpiece crackled. "Drone in position," Annika whispered. "Altitude 900 meters. Visual on the hotel roof, security rotation every 6 minutes. You're clear to move." Maya answered without moving her lips. "Copy. Begin recording on my signal." The elevator chimed, conference level. When the doors opened, the world above the clouds turned human again, chandeliers glittering like captured suns, walls lined with flags promising unity, and the quiet hum of power trading hands in plain sight. Waiters glided between clusters of delegates. Laughter covered lies. She walked through the crowd, blending in. People nodded politely, unaware they were shaking hands with their own undoing. Across the room, General Corson stood with a glass of champagne, laughing with Director Vale, the man who had signed her death certificate. The sound of their voices sent a tremor through her chest, but she didn't stop. Not yet. She passed a group of journalists near the media station, glanced at the cables running behind the consoles, and found what she needed: an auxiliary port feeding into the summit's live translation network. Perfect. She knelt briefly, pretending to adjust her shoe, and slipped a small drive into the slot disguised as a translator's chip. The light blinked once. Connected. She straightened, turned away, and walked toward the window as if admiring the view. "Transmission link secured," she murmured. "Signal stable," Annika replied. "On your command." Maya's eyes tracked Corson. He looked older, heavier, his metals brighter than his conscience. For a moment she saw flashes, the missions he'd ordered, the faces of the soldiers who never returned. She remembered the weight of those letters she'd written to their families, lying for the sake of morale. "He died a hero." The phrase still tasted like iron in her mouth. Her jaw tightened. Execute broadcast. Across the hall, the screens that had been displaying the Summit logo flickered. The laughter faltered. A few people frowned. Then numbers, faces, and bank transfers began to appear, files pulled from the drone's encrypted feed, mirrored from Annika's server. At first it looked like a glitch. Then voices, real voices, recorded in secret meetings, filled the speakers. Corson's voice, Vale's voice, discussing the sale of flight plans, weapons contracts, lives. The room froze. Phones lifted, cameras rolled. Someone shouted, "What is this?" But the question drowned beneath the wave of confusion and recognition spreading like fire through the hall. Corson's glass fell, shattering on the marble. His eyes swept the crowd, searching, and then he saw her. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The distance between them was filled with every lie he'd told and every truth she'd buried. His lips parted in disbelief. Reeves. She didn't hide anymore. She reached up, tore the fake badge from her chest and let it fall. Her voice carried through the microphones, low but clear. "You wanted me silent," she said. "You buried soldiers, civilians, and truth to build your empire. Consider this your storm." Chaos erupted. Security scrambled. Reporters surged forward, shouting her name. The drone's camera, miles above, captured everything: the room, the faces, the fear. Annika's voice echoed through Maya's earpiece. Signal mirrored to global feeds. "They can't stop it now." Corson lunged for the console, yanking cables, shouting orders, but it was too late. The data had already spread beyond containment. Screens in other rooms lit up. News agencies across continents picked up the broadcast. Military fraud exposed. Officer presumed dead alive. Someone fired. Glass shattered, screams. The crowd dropped instinctively. Maya hit the ground, rolling behind a table. The bullet lodged in the podium where she'd stood seconds earlier. She glimpsed the shooter, a mercenary in a security uniform, moving through the panic with professional precision. Old instincts took over. She grabbed the fallen guard's sidearm, chambered around, waited. Her heartbeat slowed, the way it always had in combat, time stretching, sound fading. When the shooter stepped into the open, she fired once. The shot caught his shoulder, spinning him down. The silence that followed was deafening. She rose slowly, weapon lowered, eyes sweeping the room. Corson was backing toward the balcony, face pale, gun shaking in his hand. "You don't understand, Reeves," he hissed. "We were protecting national interests." She walked toward him, each step deliberate. "You were protecting your bank account." Rain began to fall through the shattered ceiling, gentle at first, washing dust and smoke into silver streaks. Sirens wailed outside, growing louder. The drone's spotlight broke through the clouds, bathing the balcony in white fire. Corson blinked against it, the weapon trembling. For the first time she saw fear in him, not of death, but of exposure. The kind of fear that eats powerful men alive. "You're done," she said. He lowered the gun a fraction, pride fighting surrender. Then, in a moment that felt almost merciful, she reached forward, gripped his wrist, and forced the weapon down. The tension snapped. He exhaled like a man falling. "The law will finish what conscience couldn't," she said. Behind them, the doors burst open. Swiss police poured in, weapons raised, voices sharp in a dozen languages. They took him without struggle. Reporters shouted questions: "Who are you? How did you survive? What happens now?" She didn't answer. The story was already bigger than her voice. Annika's voice came through the earpiece, trembling now. "It's done, Maya. The world's watching. You're alive everywhere." Maya walked to the edge of the balcony. The lake stretched out below, calm after the chaos, its surface broken only by the rain. She opened her hand and let the pistol drop into the water far below. The splash was small, insignificant, like a period ending a long, violent sentence. She whispered, almost to herself, "Then maybe they'll believe in justice again." The wind carried the words away. She turned back to the room, shattered glass, overturned chairs, a sea of faces lit by flashing cameras. For the first time she saw something new there. Not pity, not fear, respect. Someone started clapping, then another. It spread, awkward at first, then real, applause mixed with the sound of sirens. Maya didn't bow. She just nodded once, as if acknowledging an old comrade, and walked through the mess toward the exit. Outside, the air smelled of rain and smoke. Police cars lined the boulevard. The chaos behind her faded into the distance, voices turning into static. She kept walking until she reached the edge of the lake. The sky had broken open completely now. sunlight bleeding through clouds like forgiveness. She knelt, dipped her hand into the water and watched the ripples shimmer. The cold bit her skin, but she didn't pull away. For the first time since the night they threw her from that helicopter, she wasn't fighting, running, or hiding. She was simply existing, the kind of stillness that comes after surviving your own death. She looked up at the sky, the same sky that had tried to kill her, and smiled. Small, real. "You took my wings," she whispered, "so I learned to fall without fear." Behind her, the city began to wake. Helicopters circled, sirens waned, headlines screamed. Somewhere in an office, someone was already trying to rewrite the narrative. But it didn't matter. The truth was loose, and truth doesn't go back to sleep. Annika's voice came again, softer now. "Where will you go?" Maya watched the horizon. "Anywhere they're still lying." "Need extraction." She shook her head, though Annika couldn't see it. "Not this time." She stood, water dripping from her hand, her reflection fractured by ripples. The woman looking back wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a mirror, showing the world what it didn't want to see. She turned toward the street, walking past police barricades, past reporters shouting her name. No one stopped her. They parted instinctively, as if sensing the storm still clinging to her. She didn't look back. Because sometimes survival isn't about what you escape. It's about what you refuse to carry anymore. The lake shimmered behind her. The clouds thinned to pale gold. And the voiceover inside her head, calm, quiet, steady, finally said what she'd been holding since the beginning. "They thought they'd thrown me out of the world. But all they did was give me the sky back." And with that, Maya Reeves, pilot, survivor, soldier of truth, walked into the light of a horizon that felt like redemption, not victory. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What happens to a soldier when the war ends but the noise does? The world called her a hero. Maya Reeves called herself something else, evidence. For weeks after the Geneva summit, her face filled every screen. News anchors said her name like a warning and a miracle all at once. The pilot who fell from the sky. The woman they tried to erase. Some called her the ghost who came back. Others said she was proof that corruption still bled through the veins of power, no matter how many medals they pinned over it. She didn't watch the news. She couldn't. Some nights she'd wake in the middle of darkness, drenched in sweat, heart racing to the sound of rotor blades that weren't there. The helicopter still fell in her dreams. Every time she hit the water again. Every time she heard Corson's voice, cold, confident, certain she'd never see daylight. And then always that same moment, her breath catching against the ocean's black throat as she clawed her way back up. Even victory, it seemed, could haunt you. She stayed off-grid, moving between safe houses arranged by Annika, small rooms in border towns, places where no one asked questions. For a while, she hid in a cabin above Lake Lucerne. Snow gathered on the windowsills. The air was so clean it felt like a lie. She repaired the old radio, not to listen but to dismantle, a habit that kept her hands busy when her thoughts turned heavy. Every day at dawn, she walked to the edge of the frozen lake, stared at her reflection, and wondered which version of herself she was looking at, the dead one or the one who'd lived. The world kept talking even when she didn't. Arrests followed. Corson and Vale went on trial. Senators resigned. Bank accounts were frozen, hearings televised. The truth she had unleashed didn't need her anymore. It had become a wildfire. Annika kept her updated through coded messages. Justice is slow but steady, the tide's turning. But Maya didn't feel triumphant. If anything, she felt empty, hollowed by everything it had cost to get here. One morning she found an envelope slipped under her door. No name, no return address. Inside was a photograph, a grainy still from security footage taken the night of her fall. The moment before she hit the ocean, caught in lightning. Beneath it, a note scrawled in clean block letters. "You weren't the only one they threw away." Her breath caught. For hours she sat by the fire, staring at the picture, tracing the letters with trembling fingers. Was it a threat, a message, a plea? She didn't know, but she couldn't ignore it. By nightfall, she was already packing. She burned what she couldn't carry: papers, forged IDs, even her uniform. The flames turned the room gold and ghostly. Before she left, she whispered one line into the smoke: "If there are others, I'll find them." The road led south. Mountains gave way to valleys, and valleys to forgotten towns where old wars still echoed in broken streets. She followed clues from the letter: shipping manifests, names of units disbanded after failed operations, files she remembered seeing but hadn't had time to question. It all led her to Naples. The city was a maze of sound and salt, of scooters screaming through alleyways and church bells slicing through the noise. She blended in, cap pulled low, jacket zipped high, just another stranger chasing ghosts. Annika's contact met her in a back room of an old cafe near the port. He was young, too young to have the kind of fear in his eyes that he did. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "They still have people watching." "I'm counting on that," Maya replied. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photos: soldiers, pilots, medics, faces she recognized, faces listed as missing in action. "They were part of your command structure," he said. "All of them reported anomalies in their missions before disappearing, some linked to Corson's logistics chain, others further up." "How far up?" He hesitated. "Higher than either of us can see." Maya closed the folder, jaw tight. "Then we'll climb." The contact gave her a burner phone and a single address: a warehouse outside the city near the docks. "Whatever's left of them, you'll find it there." That night she went alone. The air smelled of rust and seaweed. The warehouse was silent except for the wind pushing through cracked windows. She moved through the darkness like she used to move through enemy corridors, slow, patient, listening for breath that wasn't her own. Inside she found signs of life: makeshift cots, old rations, a half-burned logbook. Then a sound, a click. A figure stepped from the shadows, weapon drawn. Maya froze, palms open. The voice that followed stopped her heart. "Reeves." "Annika." She lowered the gun slowly, disbelief giving way to relief. "You should have called," Maya said, breathless. "I tried, you weren't answering." They stood there, both half in shadow, both half ghosts of themselves. Then Annika stepped forward and hugged her, quick, fierce, the kind of embrace that says, "I thought I'd lost you again." "What is this place?" Maya asked. Annika gestured around. "A shelter. The others from the files, they're real. Not all survived, but some did. They've been waiting for a signal." A door creaked open at the back. 3 people stepped out. 2 men, 1 woman, ragged, thin, eyes carrying the same haunted light Maya saw every morning in her mirror. One spoke. "We saw the broadcast. We didn't think it was possible. You proved it." Maya studied their faces. Soldiers turned shadows. "No," she said quietly. "You did. You stayed alive." They told her stories through the night, of missions cut off midair, of comrades ordered to vanish, of files rewritten to bury inconvenient truths. The corruption she'd exposed was only the surface. Beneath it was something older, a network that thrived on chaos, feeding wars to sell peace. At dawn, Maya stepped outside. The sea shimmered like steel. She felt the weight of their eyes on her back, people waiting for direction, for reason, for hope. She'd never wanted to lead again, not after what it had cost the last time. But sometimes leadership isn't about choice, it's about response. Annika joined her at the doorway. "You can't save everyone," she said softly. "I know," Maya replied, "but I can remind them they're not ghosts." For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the sunrise burn through the haze. Then Maya turned, resolve hardening. "We're not done." Annika sighed. "You really think you can fight a machine that big?" Maya smiled faintly. "I don't need to fight it, I just need to make it see itself." They spent the next few days gathering everything the survivors had saved: files, recordings, coded ledgers, evidence that could rebuild the truth into something undeniable. Maya's mind worked like a pilot, again, mapping routes, contingencies, escape vectors. She wasn't planning revenge anymore. She was building revelation too. But at night, when the others slept, she sat by the water, the sound of waves whispering against the pier. That's when the doubts came, the questions she couldn't outmaneuver. Had she really won anything? Or had she simply shifted the war into a new form, one fought in data, headlines, and fear instead of bullets? She remembered Corson's last words: "We were protecting national interests." Maybe he'd believed that, maybe they all did. She exhaled, voice low, speaking to the dark. "Sometimes I wonder if we all think we're the hero of the wrong story." Annika heard her once and said quietly, "You're not the hero, you're the consequence." It stuck with her. The next morning, news broke that several high-ranking officers had fled prosecution. The machine was adapting, shifting faces but keeping its core. The world congratulated itself on justice served, while the architects of the next war already drew blueprints. Maya watched the broadcast from the warehouse, silent. Annika turned off the screen. "You can disappear now. No one would blame you." Maya shook her head. "I tried disappearing once. It didn't work." "What will you do?" "Same thing I did when they threw me out of the sky." "Survive." "No," Maya said. "Rise." She walked toward the sunlight filtering through the cracked door, her silhouette cutting against the golden haze. Behind her, the others murmured, uncertain but ready. The voiceover in her mind returned, calm, deliberate. When the truth wakes up, lies start running. She didn't know where the path led, maybe another betrayal, maybe redemption. But this time she wasn't falling. She was flying low, quiet, invisible. Because survival had taught her one thing. Sometimes, the only way to win against a system built on shadows is to become one. As the day stretched ahead, she whispered into the wind, "They built an empire on silence. I'll tear it down with echoes." The sea answered, steady, endless, like approval from something greater than men or wars. And somewhere deep inside, she felt the faintest flicker of peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, the kind that comes from knowing you were never meant to. Because some battles aren't about victory. They're about memory. What does freedom cost when you've already paid with your life once? Maya Reeves didn't know anymore. Maybe freedom wasn't about escape. Maybe it was the courage to keep walking into the places that once tried to bury you. The sun had barely risen when she and the others left the warehouse. 4 survivors, a ghost squad of soldiers no one admitted existed. They moved through Naples in silence, each carrying a piece of the past and a piece of the plan. Annika drove. Maya sat in the passenger seat, eyes fixed on the horizon, every muscle coiled. Behind them, the others, Raffi, Lena, and Cole, watched the road, their faces drawn, their silence louder than conversation. They weren't soldiers anymore, not officially. But the way they moved, the way they checked exits, measured strangers, memorized reflections in windows, told a different story. Once you've lived through betrayal, paranoia becomes second nature. The plan wasn't complicated. Complicated plans fail. Maya had learned that in the cockpit, in the split second between altitude and impact. Simple saves lives. They would travel north, cross into Switzerland under forged identities, and infiltrate a data hub rumored to host encrypted communication channels for remaining military contractors, the same network that had bankrolled Corson's operations. Annika had contacts still embedded in intelligence logistics, people too tired of silence to stay quiet. Through them, she discovered that while the public celebrated the cleanup, the system had simply shifted its corruption offshore. Money rerouted, files renamed. The truth buried again, just deeper. That was where Maya came in. She wasn't just chasing ghosts anymore. She was chasing the blueprint of a lie that refused to die. By the time the mountains came into view, snow had begun to fall, thick, soft, deceptively peaceful. The border checkpoint ahead looked routine, two guards huddled in their booth, bored, cold, unalert. The team moved one at a time. Passports, smiles, lies that fit just right. When it was Maya's turn, the guard studied her photo a second too long. Her heartbeat slowed steady. She tilted her head, offered a small, tired grin. "Rough weather for travel," she said, her accent flawless. He hesitated, then stamped her passport and waved her through. Inside the van, Annika exhaled. "Still got it." "Sometimes ghosts make the best tourists," Maya said. They drove for hours until the GPS led them to a valley drowned in mist. There, hidden among pine trees, was the building they'd been searching for, an abandoned communications station once owned by a private defense firm, now reactivated under a new shell company. It looked harmless from the outside. Inside, it pulsed with quiet menace, humming servers, dim lights, the smell of ozone and old secrets. They moved in through a service hatch, Raffi disabling the alarm system with the ease of a man who'd done this too many times for the wrong side. "We've got about 20 minutes before the security sweep loops," he murmured. "Then let's make them count," Maya replied. The deeper they went, the colder it became. Rows of servers blinked like mechanical eyes. Lena connected her tablet to the main terminal. Streams of code danced across the screen. "Annika," Maya said softly, "pull up any transfers flagged with Corson's clearance level." Annika typed fast, her fingers shaking slightly. "Got something. Multiple offshore routes. Same encryption signature, different source tags." "Who's running them?" A pause, then a whisper. "Project Lazarus." The name hit Maya like a punch. She'd seen it once before, buried in an encrypted briefing months before her fall. It was supposed to be an experimental logistics program, abandoned years ago. "Can you open it?" "Trying." The screen flickered, files loaded, videos, reports. None of it made sense at first, lists of personnel marked deceased, matched to operations that never officially existed. Then her stomach turned. She saw faces, her own squadron. Pilots, medics, recon specialists, all listed as dead, all flagged with the same phrase: "Asset redeployed." "What the hell is this?" Raffi whispered. "Reactivated units," Annika said, her voice trembling. "They're using fallen soldiers' identities to run covert missions under ghost accounts. The system never loses manpower if it recycles the dead." Maya's pulse thundered in her ears. "They built an army out of names," she said, barely breathing. The realization settled like ash. The corruption hadn't been dismantled. It had evolved. Every soldier they thought lost, every family who mourned, had become a cover story for the next operation. Suddenly the server lights dimmed. A low hum filled the air. Lena looked up. "We've been traced." Maya's instinct snapped to life. Shut it down now. But it was too late. The monitors blinked red. A countdown appeared, a security lockdown. "Out!" Maya shouted. They ran, boots slapping against concrete. The exit light flickered like a dying heartbeat. Behind them, mechanical locks sealed one by one. They burst through the maintenance corridor just as the first blast rocked the lower level, an automated wipe, erasing every bite of evidence in a firestorm of data. Outside, snow fell faster, thicker. Steam poured from the vents, glowing red against the white. Raffi cursed. "They torched it all." "Not all," Lena said, holding up her tablet. "I mirrored fragments before the purge." Maya nodded, breath clouding in the cold. "Then we still have a truth to carry." They retreated to a cabin deep in the woods, the kind of place that didn't appear on any map. For hours, the team worked in silence, piecing together fragments of what they'd found. Names, coordinates, military contracts linked to private armies, and one recurring code buried in every file, a symbol like a wing split by lightning. Annika stared at it, brow furrowed. It's not just a project, it's an ideology, a network that believes chaos keeps order profitable. Maya looked at the symbol again. Then we'll make it unprofitable. Later, when the others slept, she sat outside the cabin, the snow muffling the world into silence. The stars looked cold and distant, like memories refusing to fade. Annika joined her, wrapping her jacket tighter. You can't keep doing this forever, Maya. I'm not, she said quietly. I'm just finishing what they started when they threw me out of that helicopter. Annika gave her a long, searching look. And after, what happens when there's nothing left to expose? Maya didn't answer right away. The fire cracked. Wind moved through the trees. Then maybe, she said finally, I'll finally learn how to live. Without war. Without ghosts. The words hung there, soft, fragile, uncertain. By dawn, the team was on the move again. Lena's data revealed a transport schedule, a convoy carrying encrypted drives from Zurich to a private airstrip near Munich. If they intercepted it, they could retrieve the last untouched archive of Project Lazarus. Simple plan, dangerous execution, the kind Maya specialized in. They reached the ridge overlooking the airstrip just as the sun began to rise. The convoy arrived, 3 trucks, unmarked, guarded by men in tactical black. Maya studied their formation through binoculars. Precision, discipline, the kind of soldiers who didn't ask questions. She exhaled slowly. We've got one chance. We hit the comms, disable the escort, grab the drives, and vanish before anyone realizes what's missing. Raffi grinned, the first hint of life in days, just like old times. Except now we're the ones without backup, Annika murmured. Maya smirked. Backup slows you down. The ambush was fast, surgical. Smoke grenades, controlled chaos, silence where there should have been screams. Within 5 minutes, the team had the cargo secured and the guards disarmed. No casualties, no witnesses. Inside the metal case were 6 drives, identical, sealed, humming faintly. Lena plugged one into her tablet. Encrypted but not military grade. I can crack it. Do it, Maya said. When the files opened, silence fell. Video logs, meeting notes, signatures, contracts authorizing covert deployments across continents, each operation tagged under Project Lazarus, and at the bottom of the final document, a name Maya hadn't expected to see. Director Ansel Care. He wasn't military. He was corporate, the architect behind half the defense deals of the last decade, the man who'd once shaken Maya's hand and called her the best pilot we've ever trained. Annika's voice was ice. He's the one Corson reported to. Maya's fingers tightened around the tablet. The betrayal she thought she'd already avenged had roots that went deeper and higher. Then Geneva was just chapter 1, she said. What now? Raffi asked. Maya looked toward the horizon, the same direction she'd fallen from once, the same sky she'd sworn to reclaim. Now, she said quietly, we remind them the dead don't stay buried. The wind picked up, scattering snow like ashes. The sky above was wide, endless, neither enemy nor friend. She closed her eyes, hearing again the hum of rotor blades that had once marked her execution. But this time, it wasn't fear she felt. It was resolve. Because somewhere, the men who thought they could rewrite history were already preparing their next erasure. And somewhere beneath those same skis, a woman they'd killed was rewriting her own. The camera of the mind would fade slowly here, Maya standing at the edge of the ridge, snow swirling around her, eyes lifted toward the sky she refused to surrender. The voice that carried through her thoughts was quiet but unyielding. They built their empire on silence. Now I'll make the silence speak. How many times can one person come back from the dead before they stop recognizing the world they returned to? Maya Reeves had been resurrected by truth once already, and it had nearly broken her. Now, truth was a weapon again, sharper, heavier, harder to hold. 3 days after the convoy raid, they were ghosts once more, moving across borders on falsified routes. The snow had turned to rain, washing away their tracks but not the weight of what they carried. The data they'd stolen pulsed like a heartbeat inside the encrypted drive, 6 terabytes of lies wrapped in clean signatures and official seals. Annika drove through the Bavarian backroads, the wipers beating time against the glass. The others slept in the back, exhaustion sinking deeper than sleep. Maya watched the road ahead, her reflection faint in the window, the same eyes that once looked out from a cockpit, now older, sharper, quieter. "Care's hosting a gala," Annika said after a long silence. "Munich, 2 nights from now, charity cover, defense contracts on the side, all the same faces. Politicians, investors, ghosts in suits." "Security?" Maya asked. "Private, layered, he built it himself." "Then he'll never expect a ghost to walk through the door." Annika shot her a glance. "You think we can get close?" Maya's lips curved slightly. "We won't have to. He'll invite us himself." Annika frowned. "How?" "By making him believe he already knows us." The plan took shape in silence. Raffi forged credentials linking them to a non-existent media syndicate specializing in defense reporting. Lena rewired an old transmitter to piggyback on Care's private network. Annika compiled a digital profile of a fake journalist, credentials spotless, background immaculate, complete with a portfolio of articles praising Care. Humanitarian defense reforms. By morning, their invitation arrived. Care's assistant replied with enthusiasm. "Of course, Ms. Cade, we'd be honored to host you." The irony wasn't lost on Maya. The alias she'd used in Geneva was now her ticket into the belly of a new beast. That night, under a rented light in a safe house outside the city, she stood before a cracked mirror, buttoning the black suit that made her look like someone who belonged at a gala. Her reflection didn't blink, her hands did. The trembling wasn't fear, it was restraint. Annika adjusted the mic hidden in her lapel. "You sure you're ready?" Maya met her eyes in the mirror. "Ready ended the night they pushed me out of that helicopter." The gala was held in an old museum converted into a fortress of glass and marble. Floodlights swept across the facade. Luxury cars lined the entrance like trophies of power. Inside, everything gleamed: champagne, laughter, lies. The air smelled of money and quiet ambition. Maya walked in with practiced grace, the ghost wrapped in silk and calm. Security wands passed over her without suspicion. Cameras flashed. Names were exchanged like currency. Annika murmured in her earpiece, "Care's on the upper level, flanked by 2 guards, both former spec ops. Watch your step." "I don't step," Maya whispered. "I glide." She ascended the staircase, the hum of the crowd fading behind her. At the top, Care stood before a display of aircraft schematics, his empire disguised as innovation. He turned when she approached, smiling the kind of smile that had probably bought nations. "Miss Cade," he said warmly, "I've read your work." She tilted her head slightly. "Then you know I don't write fiction." He laughed. "Good, I prefer reality." They shook hands. His grip was firm, confident, but his eyes, pale, calculating, flickered for just a second, as if something in her face disturbed a memory he couldn't place. She let the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. "Would you join me for a drink?" he asked. "Of course." They sat in a private lounge overlooking the museum floor. Care talked easily about policy, progress, his version of peace. Maya listened, letting him fill the air with his own arrogance. Every sentence confirmed what she already knew. He believed himself untouchable. When he finally paused, she asked quietly, "Do you ever think about the ones who built all this for you?" He smiled faintly. "Everyone builds something for someone. That's the order of things. Even the dead." That made him look at her, really look. For a moment she saw a flicker of recognition, faint but real. His pupils tightened, his tone cooled. "You remind me of someone." "Do I?" An officer, Air Division, years ago. She leaned forward. What happened to her? He held her gaze. She was a casualty of disobedience. Her heart stilled, and the system survived. He smiled. It always does. She smiled back, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes, until it doesn't. Downstairs, the team was already in motion. Lena and Raffi moved through the corridors disguised as event staff, planting small transceivers near CARE's private servers. Annika monitored the feeds from a van parked across the street, her voice steady in their ears. Transmission lines open, copying local drive access now. CARE lifted his glass. To progress, he said. Maya lifted hers. To consequence. The toast rang hollow. The glass was cold in her hand. A vibration buzzed against her wrist, Annika's coded signal. They had the files. Every transaction, every name, every operation linked to Project Lazarus. Maya stood. Thank you for your time, Director. You've been illuminating. CARE rose too, suspicion flickering behind charm. Leaving so soon. Some stories write themselves. As she turned, his hand caught her wrist, polite, possessive, warning. Tell me, Ms. Cade, he said softly. Have we met before? She leaned in, her voice a whisper against his ear. Only in your nightmares. Then she walked away. Outside, the night air cut sharp and clean. The rain had stopped, leaving the city slick with reflections. She crossed the courtyard, each step measured. In her ear, Annika's voice came fast. We've got everything, pulling out. Copy, Maya replied. Then she heard it, the sound of boots. A dozen, maybe more. Shadows moved from the alleys. Black vehicles idled at the edge of the square. Contact, she hissed. Gunfire erupted. The world shattered into noise and motion. She dove behind a column as glass exploded above her. Civilians screamed, scattering into the night. Extraction compromised, Annika shouted. Maya rolled, returned fire, 2 shots, clean, disabling. Fall back to the east side. I'll draw them. Negative, Annika snapped. We stay together. Do it, Maya's voice cut like thunder. She sprinted toward the far gate, firing in controlled bursts. The men chasing her were trained, efficient, not thugs, not mercs. Corporate security with military discipline. They wanted her alive. That was their mistake. She reached the edge of the plaza, vaulted over a barrier, and vanished into the rain-slick streets. The city swallowed her whole. Minutes later, she ducked into an abandoned tram tunnel, breath burning in her chest. The team regrouped one by one, Annika first, then Raffi and Lena, soaked, shaking, alive. We've got the drives, Raffi panted, but they know. They always know, Maya said. Annika looked at her. You okay? Maya nodded, though her hands trembled. He recognized me, not enough to name it, but enough to start remembering. Then we move fast, Annika said, before he connects the dots. They set up in an underground station, power running off scavenged generators. Lena began decrypting the drives. The glow of her tablet painted their faces ghostly blue. Maya, she whispered after a while, there's more here than Lazarus. This is global. Civilian data, communications intercepts, they've been building a control map, predictive models on unrest targeting dissent before it even happens. Raffi cursed softly. They're manufacturing obedience. Maya felt the air leave her lungs. No, she said, they're weaponizing silence. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, distant, deliberate, like an omen. She walked to the tunnel mouth, staring into the rain. Neon lights blurred in puddles, bending the city into something unreal. Annika joined her. If we release this, there's no going back. You'll be hunted by more than ghosts this time. I've been hunted my whole life, Maya said quietly. But at least now, I'm the one choosing the battlefield. Annika studied her for a long moment. You know, she said softly, sometimes I think you don't want peace. You just want purpose. Maya didn't deny it. Maybe they're the same thing. Back inside, the screens flickered to life. Faces filled them, government officials, private contractors, analysts, every name linked by CARE's network. Proof not of one conspiracy, but of an entire ecosystem feeding on fear. This isn't about revenge anymore, Annika said. It never was, Maya whispered. It's about memory. They watched the files transfer into a hidden cloud node Annika had built years ago, encrypted beyond recovery. Once released, it couldn't be taken back. The world would see it, every secret, every betrayal, every ghost brought into the light. When the final progress bar hit 100, the power flickered. The system crashed. Lena gasped, "They found us." Static flooded the screens. Then a voice, distorted but clear, filled the speakers. "Maya Reeves. Care. You should have stayed dead." For a moment, no one moved. The echo of his voice lingered like smoke. Maya stepped closer to the monitor, her reflection fractured across the shattered glass. "You built your world on the graves of the forgotten," she said softly. "But the dead don't obey." Silence. Then his voice again, calm, almost admiring. "Then let's see if they can survive resurrection twice." The feed cut out. Darkness swallowed the tunnel. The rain outside turned heavy again, beating against the earth like rotor blades. And somewhere in that storm, Maya Reeves felt it, the quiet before the next fall. She holstered her weapon, eyes narrowing. "He's coming." Annika nodded, jaw set. "Then we hold the line." Maya looked up toward the tunnel's mouth, where the faintest light glowed through the storm. Her voice was low, steady, certain. "They thought the truth was a weakness," she said. "Let's show them it's a weapon." How do you fight an enemy who already lives inside your silence? Maya Reeves had asked herself that question before, in deserts, in skis, in interrogation rooms where truth was treated like contraband. But tonight, in the darkness of the tunnel, the question wasn't theoretical anymore. The monitors were dead. The sound of Care's voice still lingered in the static, low, measured, the kind of calm only men who owned chaos could afford. "You should have stayed dead," he'd said. Maybe he was right. The dead don't feel betrayal. The living do. The generator hummed weakly, the last of its fuel burning out. The others sat in the dim glow of emergency lamps. Annika was packing, her jaw locked. Raffi cleaned his weapon like he needed the ritual to stay sane. Lena's eyes never left the dark screen of her tablet, as if she could will it back to life. Maya stood apart, near the tunnel mouth, watching the faint shimmer of rain against the night. Every drop sounded like a ticking clock. "They found us too fast," Raffi said finally, breaking the silence. "We were clean, no trace." "Everyone leaves a trace," Maya murmured. Annika turned sharp. "Not this fast, someone gave us up." Her eyes swept the room, stopping on each of them before settling on Maya. "You sure your little resurrection didn't attract a shadow we didn't see?" Maya met her gaze. "If they tracked me, they'd have killed me already. They want the data, not the body." "Maybe they want both," Annika shot back. Lena flinched at the edge in her tone. "Stop," she whispered. "We don't have time to tear each other apart." But the damage was already bleeding through the air. The paranoia that had kept them alive was now turning inward. Maya looked at the others, saw exhaustion cracking the edges of loyalty. Months of running, hiding, watching friends vanish. It changes people. She'd seen it before in the cockpit, in the faces of soldiers who'd flown too many missions without answers. Everyone breaks differently. She sat down on the cold concrete back against the wall. Her hands were steady, but inside, her thoughts twisted like smoke. Maybe Annika was right. Maybe she'd brought this on them. The moment she came back from the dead, she'd become a signal flare for every predator still feeding on the system she'd exposed. Outside, thunder rolled again. The storm hadn't left, it had just been waiting. "Power's gone," Lena whispered. "We're blind." Maya looked up. "Then we move, we can't stay buried." "Move where?" Raffi snapped. Every safe house is burned, every route compromised. We're running on ghosts and luck. Then we make luck, Maya said, standing. We split 2 teams. One carries the drives, one draws them off. Annika shook her head. No, splitting up gets us killed. Staying together already did, Maya replied quietly. The words hung heavy. For a second no one spoke. Then Lena said softly, she's right. Annika turned on her. You think dividing us helps? I think we're already divided, Lena whispered. At least this way some of us have a chance. Maya saw the pain in Annika's eyes before she turned away, not anger, not yet, but something sharper. Fear dressed as defiance. They packed fast. Minimal gear, no lights. The tunnels stretched in 2 directions, one leading toward the old subway exits, the other toward the river. Maya handed the smaller data drive to Annika. You take it, she said. If they're tracking signals, you'll have less noise on the move. Annika hesitated. You trust me with it? I always have. The look that passed between them was short. Electric trust and doubt tangled too tightly to separate. Then Annika nodded once and disappeared into the shadows with Raffi. Maya waited until their footsteps faded, then turned to Lena. You okay? Lena nodded, but her voice was small. Do you ever wonder what it's like to stop running? Every day. Would you if you could? Maya's eyes softened. No, because stopping means letting them win. They moved through the lower tunnels, the walls sweating moisture. The air smelled of rust and ghosts. Maya's flashlight flickered, dying. She switched it off. Better darkness than detection. They reached a ladder leading to the surface. Above, the storm screamed through broken vents. Maya climbed first, pushing open the grate. Cold rain hit her face. The city was a blur of lights and sirens, distant but coming closer. She pulled Lena up beside her. Stay close. They moved along the service road, keeping to shadows. Every passing car felt like a threat, every corner a question. When they reached the riverbank, Maya paused. The water churned black and fast. Across it, industrial lights glowed faintly. This way, she said. They followed the river, boots slipping in mud. Behind them, thunder cracked. Maya's senses were sharp, every sound magnified, footsteps on gravel, the whisper of rain against metal, the faint hiss of a voice too close to be wind. She turned, gun raised. Nothing, just darkness. But the feeling didn't fade. When they reached the edge of an old warehouse district, Lena stopped. Maya. Maya turned and froze. Annika stood there, soaked, breath ragged, alone. Where Raffi? Maya asked. Annika didn't answer right away. Her eyes looked hollow, unfocused. He's gone. Gone where? Annika swallowed. He didn't make it. Something in her tone felt wrong, too flat, too fast. Maya studied her face, searching for cracks. What happened? Ambush, he covered me. Lena lowered her head, whispering a prayer. Maya stepped closer, voice quiet but sharp. And the drive? Annika hesitated, just long enough. Maya's stomach sank. You don't have it, do you? Annika met her eyes, and for the first time since they'd met, she looked away first. Where is it? Maya demanded. I did what I had to. Maya took a step forward. What did you do, Annika? Care called me. The words came out like a confession ripped from bone. He had Raffi. He said he'd let him live if I gave up the location of the backup node. Lena's eyes widened. You told him. I didn't have a choice, Annika shouted. I thought I could stall, buy time. But you didn't, Maya said softly. Silence fell. The rain filled it. Annika's voice broke. He had his gun to Raffi's head. I heard him beg, Maya, I heard him. Maya's expression didn't change. Not cold, not cruel, just unbearably still. We don't trade one ghost for another. I know, Annika whispered, tears mixing with the rain, but I couldn't lose another one. Something inside Maya cracked, not from anger but understanding. The line between mercy and mistake was thinner than people thought. She crossed it herself too many times to count. Maya holstered her weapon and turned toward the water. He knows where we are now. Annika wiped her face. Then we run. Maya shook her head. No, we finish it. Lena stepped forward. Maya. Go with her, Maya said quietly. Get to the ridge. If I don't come back, you release what's left of the files. Maya, no. She turned, eyes like steel under lightning. That's an order. Lena hesitated, then nodded. She pulled Annika's arm, leading her toward the far path. Annika resisted for a moment, guilt rooting her to the ground, but Maya's voice cut through the rain, soft, final. You can still make this mean something, Annika. Don't waste the pain. And then she was gone, swallowed by the storm. Maya moved through the rain-soaked alleys, the sound of sirens growing louder. She didn't feel fear anymore, only clarity, the kind that comes when everything else is stripped away. She knew care was close. Men like him didn't hide, they waited. She reached a bridge overlooking the river, the same river that carried her reflection back like a ghost. The air was cold, sharp with electricity. Her earpiece crackled once, then his voice. You've lost, Maya. Your team, your files, your truth, all gone. She didn't answer. She just looked at the skyline, the way the lights trembled in the water. Care's voice softened, almost pitying. You can't save a world that doesn't want saving. Maya smiled faintly. Maybe not, but I can remind it what survival looks like. Survival isn't victory. It's enough for now. She pulled the last transmitter from her pocket, a small, cracked device linked to the remnants of the data Lena had salvaged. She set it on the railing, pressed a single button, and watched the faint blue light blink to life. Goodbye, Care. The line went dead. Thunder rolled above as she turned away. The rain softened, just a little, like the storm itself was exhaling. Somewhere behind her, Annika and Lena were still running. Maybe they'd make it, maybe not, but they'd carry something forward, a fragment of truth, a seed of defiance. And Maya, she didn't run anymore. She stood on the bridge, alone but unbroken, watching the light from the transmitter pulse against the darkness. It wasn't much, but sometimes all you need is a pulse. Because a pulse means you're still alive. And being alive in a world built to erase you is its own kind of rebellion. Rain softened to mist by dawn, the kind that doesn't fall so much as it lingers, quiet, patient, forgiving. The city was still half asleep, unaware that somewhere beneath its calm surface, a war of silence had just burned itself out. Maya Reeves walked along the empty bridge where night had bled into morning. The transmitter light had faded to nothing, its final signal swallowed by the clouds. She didn't need to check if it had sent what it needed to. She learned long ago that faith isn't believing something will happen. It's acting like it already has. The river below murmured like a voice half-remembered. Every ripple caught a fragment of light, a reflection of things lost and kept. She leaned against the railing, her breath ghosting into the cold air. Her hands trembled, not from fear but release. Behind her, footsteps echoed, slow, steady, familiar. She didn't turn. You came, she said quietly. Annika's voice answered, soft, cracked. You didn't think I'd let you vanish again, did you? Maya closed her eyes. You should have. I told you to run. And I did, but there's a difference between running and leaving. Maya finally looked at her. Annika stood at the edge of the bridge, soaked through, eyes rimmed red. The guilt still lived there, heavy but human. She reached into her coat, pulled out a small drive sealed in plastic. I lied, she whispered. I made 2 copies. Maya took it, her fingers brushing against hers. The metal was cold, the kind of cold that wakes something sleeping. You disobeyed an order. Annika smiled weakly. Guess I learned from the best. They stood together, the world around them slowly brightening. Traffic began to hum in the distance. The sky opened pale and fragile. Do you think it's enough? Annika asked. Maya looked at the drive. It felt impossibly small for something that carried so much truth. Enough for who? For anyone to care. Maya's answer came after a long pause. Maybe caring isn't the point anymore. Maybe remembering is. They started walking, leaving the bridge behind. The storm had scoured the streets clean, washing away the evidence of chaos. But Maya knew better. Nothing ever really washed away. It just sank deeper until someone was brave or foolish enough to dig it up again. They reached an old cafe opening for the morning crowd. The smell of coffee and baked bread filled the air. It smelled like peace, or at least something pretending to be it. They sat near the window, two shadows among the waking city. Annika stirred her coffee without drinking. You could disappear now, for real this time. Maya traced the rim of her cup. Disappearing, easy. It's living that's hard. You've earned it. So did a lot of people who didn't get the chance. Silence settled between them, comfortable in a way only shared scars can be. The world outside moved like a film slowed down, buses hissing, children laughing, life daring to continue. Maya watched them, her reflection caught in the glass. The woman staring back wasn't the ghost who had fallen from the helicopter. She wasn't the soldier driven by vengeance either. She looked human, tired but human. A soft vibration in her jacket broke the moment, a notification from an untraceable line. She unlocked the device and saw a message. Global feed live in 0300. Transmission confirmed. Lena She made it. Maya smiled faintly. It's happening. Annika exhaled, eyes glistening. Then it's over. Maya shook her head slowly. No, truth doesn't end things, it just starts them. 3 minutes later, the cafe's television flickered on. The morning news anchor's voice trembled as footage filled the screen. Documents, signatures, intercepted calls, everything they'd fought for spilling into daylight. Names once hidden beneath layers of clearance now scrolled across the world's vision. People inside the cafe froze. Forks clattered, conversations died. One man whispered, "My God." For the first time in years, Maya felt the air shift. The collective inhale of a world realizing it had been watching the wrong heroes. Annika looked at her. You did it. Maya's voice was calm. We did enough. Reporters would spend years dissecting what came next. Politicians would deny, courts would stall, systems would adapt. But somewhere quieter and more important, a single truth had taken root. The kind of truth that never really dies once it's seen. They stayed in the cafe until the rain stopped completely. Then Maya stood, left money on the table, and looked toward the street where sunlight finally touched the wet pavement. Where will you go? Annika asked. Maya considered it. Somewhere without uniforms, somewhere where people don't salute to prove they're alive. You could teach, Annika said. You always had a way with pilots. Maya smiled. Maybe I'll teach them how to fall properly. Annika laughed, the first real laugh since before the storm. It sounded strange but right, like a song remembered halfway. They walked outside. The light was gentle now, diffused through thinning clouds. Maya turned her face toward it, eyes half closed, letting the warmth sink through the chill. It felt different, less like forgiveness, more like acceptance. They reached the end of the street where paths split, one toward the station, one toward the hills. Annika stopped. This is where I turn off. Maya nodded. Keep moving, don't look back. Annika hesitated. And you? Maya looked toward the hills, the open road beyond. I've been falling long enough. Time to learn how to land. Annika smiled softly, saluted without formality. See you in the next storm. Not if I can help it. And then Annika was gone, her figure fading into the crowd. Maya stood for a moment, alone, the wind tugging at her coat, the city alive around her. For the first time, the noise didn't feel like threat. It felt like heartbeat. She walked toward the hills. The rhythm of her steps matched the slow hum of the waking world. Every sound felt earned, every breath reclaimed. As she reached the ridge overlooking the valley, she stopped and looked back. From up here, the city looked peaceful, small, unaware. She thought of all the names: Corson, Vale, Care, Raffi, Lena, Annika. Every one of them written somewhere inside her like coordinates. Every one of them proof that wars don't end, they just change shape. She sat on the edge of the ridge, the wind cold but clean. Her hand brushed against her jacket pocket where the last drive rested. She could destroy it now, toss it into the river, vanish completely. But she didn't. Instead, she pulled out her notebook, the one she'd carried since the night she'd fallen. Most of its pages were smudged, ruined by rain, blood, time. But one blank page remained. She wrote slowly, the ink bleeding a little from her wet fingers. They thought silence was control, but silence only waits for someone brave enough to listen. She closed the notebook, tucked it back into her jacket, and leaned into the wind. Below, church bells began to ring, soft, distant, out of sync, but beautiful in their imperfection. She smiled. The voice in her mind, the one that had once shouted commands, calculated angles, screamed through storms, had grown quiet now. Not gone, just quiet. She whispered into the air, maybe this is what surviving really means, not fighting the fall, but finding the ground that was waiting all along. Her eyes lifted to the sky. The clouds had broken completely. Blue stretched endless and honest, untouched by orders or lies. She breathed it in like forgiveness. Behind her, the world would move on. New names, new missions, new wars pretending to be peace. But some things would remain changed. The way people looked at authority, the way soldiers questioned silence, the way truth, once seen, refused to disappear again. She stood, hands in her pockets, coat flapping in the wind. A train horn sounded faintly in the distance. The horizon shimmered gold. She started walking. No destination, no mission, just motion. And for the first time, it didn't feel like running. It felt like release. The narrator's tone would lower here, softer, almost reverent. She had fallen once, from trust, from sky, from everything she believed was unbreakable. But fall long enough and you learn something the ground can't teach. You learn that gravity doesn't own you. Fear doesn't define you. And that sometimes the greatest strength is refusing to become what broke you. The camera of the world would pull back. Maya Reeves, small against an ocean of light, walking toward a horizon that wasn't promise or punishment, just possibility. And as the wind carried her silhouette into the brightness, her final thought lingered like a whisper left for whoever came next. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. Fade to silence, then to light.